Hi everyone, I'm Stephanie Weaver. Welcome back to the Blue and Yellow Kitchen. In each episode, I make a dish inspired by a new book while talking to its author. Today's book is The Parted Earth, and I'm making spinach pakora. I'd like to welcome Anjali Enjeti, author of The Parted Earth, to the Blue and Yellow Kitchen. Welcome, Anjali.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. It is such an immense pleasure to be here. I love episodes of the Blue and the Yellow Kitchen, and I'm so excited to watch you prepare this dish and talk about the book.
Great. So tell me a little bit about what the book is about and give us the background on the significant historical event that takes place, because one of the reasons I chose the book is because I didn't know anything about this event and I couldn't believe I didn't know anything about it. So tell us about that.
Absolutely. So not many people who do not have any sort of South Asian origin know about partition. But basically, the British had occupied the subcontinent for a couple hundred years in one form or another. And in 1947, after getting pressure from Indians, the British finally quit India, meaning they left India. But before they did, a British attorney literally drew a line in the sand to form two new nations. One of them was India, which would be the Hindu and Sikh majority nation. And the other nation was Pakistan, which was the Muslim majority nation. And back then, Pakistan was actually in two pieces. There was the eastern part, which today is Bangladesh, and the northwestern part, which is Pakistan today, what we know Pakistan to be.
Okay.
So after this line was drawn, there was incredible amounts of violence as Hindus and Sikhs who were in the new Pakistan had to abandon their homes and everything they ever knew and move to India. And the Muslims that were in India had to move to Pakistan. And what happened is there were 15 million refugees overnight. It is the largest human migration in the world. And there was incredible amounts of communal violence. Between 1 and 2 million people died. And my book begins in 1947, in the summer of partition, and features a young 16-year-old girl named Deepa. But it also charts the 70 years after partition. And it goes into several countries, several continents, and several decades during their 70 years to show how what happened to Deepa in 1947 actually also affected and shaped the lives of her descendants.
So thank you for that. So viewers and readers, if you are a white person like me who lives in the United States, this may all be very shocking to you as it was to me. So I just couldn't believe that I'd never seen a movie about it, read a book about it, that I hadn't heard about it in history class. And so that's one of the reasons, not the only reason, but it's one of the reasons I chose this book for the show, is because I wanted, because every Indian friend that I have who I've talked to about it has said, oh, yes. And then they tell me this whole story about how it affected their family. So I just was sort of shocked that this was kind of not that well known to white Americans in the United States. And I thought it was that literature is such a great way into history and into these stories. So thank you for sharing that. That was very concise as well, which is great. So tell us a little bit about the actual events of the book. Like, kind of give us the overview of Deepa and her family and what sort of a little bit of what happens.
So the book takes place starts out in 1947 with Deepa, who is falling in love with Amir. But Amir and his family are Muslims, so they need to leave to Pakistan. So she's worried about being able to maintain this relationship. And unfortunately, a tragedy befalls her family, and she ends up being whisked away to London. So she does not see Amir after that. The book also takes place in 2016 with her granddaughter, Sean Johnson, whose life is falling apart due to a pregnancy loss and a marriage that falls apart. And Sean begins to search for her roots. And so the book jumps back and forth in time, in different decades, in different countries, to try to piece together what happened to Deepa and how it has affected Sean's life.
That's so fantastic. So we wanted to just give you kind of a brief overview to whet your appetite for the book, which is fantastic. And also, you can see from her description about the period of partition how relevant the themes of the book are now, because we're seeing hate crimes on the rise against Asian Americans here in this country. And we're seeing the challenges of nationalism and the hatred and violence that goes around that. So it's very current, as well as you'll learn some stuff too. So that's partly why I chose it. All right, so the recipe I'm making today is spinach pakora from a wonderful cookbook that I always turn to for authentic Indian dishes called Indian for Everyone by Anupi Singla. And the reason that I chose the book, it is that the dish is actually mentioned in the book. And pakora, you said, Anjali, that it tends to be a more of a northern dish, which is where the book is set, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And also, everybody in the book's kind of on the move, and there's a lot of fragmentation and just being dislocated. And so something that you could wrap up in a napkin and eat later felt like the right dish for this book. So I've asked Anjali to read a short passage. While she's reading, I'm going to be frying up the pakora, and then we'll talk about the recipe after she reads. So go ahead and set up who's in the scene, where the scene takes place, and then go ahead and read. And then I'm going to hopefully the frying won't be too loud, or we may. So we'll see. Go ahead.
So this is very early on in the book. This is Sean and Amir meeting up after school. Amir has his little sister Layla there, who is 6 years old. And at this point in the book, Deepa has a big crush on Amir and doesn't really know how Amir feels about her. A beige paper drifted to the ground. Deepa reached down and picked it up. It was shaped like a small oval bowl, but it came to a point at each end. Smudged fingerprints covered the folds. She balanced it upright in the center of her palm. "What's this?" she asked. "Origami," Amir said. "Japanese paper folding. A friend taught me how to do it. This one's a gondola. Do you know what that is?" A painting of a gondola floating through the canals of Venice hung above her parents' bed at home. Its gondolier paddled a young couple through the shallow waters of the Grand Canal. The woman, mid-laugh, wore a dress with lace and ribbons. She held an umbrella over her head, gazed lovingly at the man across from her. When Deepa was younger, she wrote a story about the couple, a prince and princess who'd snuck out on the castle to escape the confines of royalty in search of a land where they could simply live together as husband and wife, nothing more, nothing less. "My parents have a painting of one in our flat, but I've never seen anything like this," she said. This paper gondola was sturdy. She peeked underneath one flap, imagined his fingers pressing and creasing it. "Did you use glue?" He leaned in. His shadow passed over the boat. "See here?" He pointed to the bow with his long, thin fingers. The folds interlock to maintain its form. She felt his stare gravitate higher toward her face. She ran her tongue over her front teeth, hoping to clear them of any food trapped from lunch. She hoped her breath didn't stink. "May I have the boat back, please?" Layla said, rocking her body from side to side. "Oh, certainly, Layla." Deepa had forgotten the child was with them. They had an audience of one, a precocious one at that. She handed it back. "It's really quite wonderful." Layla tugged her brother's arm. "Amir, can you make one for Deepa too?" "I'd be happy to. I can make you whatever you want, Deepa. How about a flower or a bird?" "I don't want to trouble you," she said, though she instantly regretted it. She would give anything to have something Amir made with his own hands.
That's great. Thank you so much. I'm just pulling the pakora out. I think we timed that perfectly, I'm hoping. And so, readers, if you notice the cover of the book are there are cranes. Those are cranes, right, on the cover?
They are cranes.
Yeah.
Yes, very significant for the novel.
Yes. So they're part of the story. And so the only spoiler I'll give you is that he does in fact make her something with his own hands. At least
He
once. At least once. Okay, so let's show off these little guys here. So, can you see that, Mr. Microwave Boy? Okay, how do those look, ma'am?
Oh, they look yummy, Stephanie. I wish I could eat them.
Good. So let's talk a little bit about pakora. So, so the recipe tip I'm going to share today, let me show you the batter. So this is the batter. So these are made from chopped spinach, fresh spinach, finely chopped onion, and then graham, or it's chickpea flour. So it's called graham, sometimes GRAM or BESAM, besan when you buy it. It has this sort of creamy, sort of buttery color to it, and it's ground dried chickpeas. And that's what sets up the batter. So you want it to be kind of thick like this. And then my tip is make sure you cut everything by hand. Otherwise, if you use a food processor, it releases too much liquid and you'll have to keep adding flour. But to use an ice cream scooper, because then you can just drop it right into the hot oil and it holds together really nicely. And then they fry up kind of uneven like this, but you can see the sort of the chunky vegetables in there. Tell us, so you said that your family does not make pakora, but you love them. Is that right? Am I remembering that right?
Yes, that's true. My family is from the South. They were based in Chennai and Hyderabad. Pakora was not something that we typically made, but it is one of my favorite Indian foods to eat. So I don't make them myself, but I do eat them at my friend's house. My friends from North India, many of them live in my neighborhood. They make them all the time, and I make sure to invite myself over to eat them. And whenever we go to an Indian restaurant, I definitely eat my pakoras. They're delicious.
Yeah, and they're also gluten-free. And then they normally come with one or two kind of chutneys to dip or pour over them. The mint green chutney, and then there's like a tamarind chutney, right?
Yes.
Or sauce. Yes. Okay. So yes, I'm a fan.
I love the tamarind when I eat pakoras, I love it with the tamarind sauce. That's my preference.
So I'm just going to show. Can you see that?
Oh, I can. Look at that steam coming up. That looks amazing.
So they are cooked through. So if you have a thermometer, you want it at 350. But Anupi mentions that if you don't have a thermometer, you can drop a cumin seed into the batter, and it should immediately rise to the surface and bubble, and that'll tell you that it's hot enough. But usually the first one, oftentimes the temperature's not quite right. So let me make sure it's not too hot. That's perfect.
Tastes good?
That is delicious. So it's crispy on the outside. It's tender. It has this hearty quality to it from the chickpea flour. I'm getting a pop of the fresh ginger, a pop of the red pepper powder. I also had a little jalapeno from my garden that I was able to throw in there. And then there's some spices as well. So it's just delicious. I could eat, well, and I will, because they're not my great boy's favorites, which is surprising to me because he does love Indian food. So I'm going to be eating all of these myself, which is terrible. It's a terrible, terrible thing. Okay.
And you can eat them right away because they always taste best right after they're made, and they don't stay well, right?
No, they're definitely something you want to eat as soon as they're made.
Yeah, they just don't reheat very well, unfortunately.
No, but so the reason that I really thought of these is that you could picture someone having made them or picking them up from a street vendor and wrapping them up and then eating them on a train or eating them on a vehicle because there was a lot of traveling and moving around and having to run in the book. So when you're reading the book, which please do buy it, picture these little hearty little pockets of deliciousness, maybe wrapped up in a napkin that someone is going to eat as they're moving along. So Anjali, thank you so much for being here today. It was such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. I love that this is such an interesting and fun way that you introduce books to the world. And it makes me so happy to be here. So thank you so much for reading The Parted Earth, and thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely. So you'll find the recipe link in the Facebook video comments or on my website, migraine-relief-recipes.com. You'll find her at anjalienjeti.com. She also has another brand new book out called Southbound, which is a book of beautiful essays. So if you like her writing, pick up her other book. And if you enjoyed the show, please share it with a friend. Order a copy of The Parted Earth wherever you like to buy books, including your local independent bookstore. And if you don't have a book buying budget, you can really help out an author by asking your library to carry it, because libraries buy books as well. Follow me at sweavermph or like me on Facebook so that you don't miss an episode. Join us next time for another author interview and a dish inspired by their book. Thanks so much for watching The Blue and Yellow Kitchen.